G'day, back again with James Miller. We've just discussed some aspects of intelligence augmentation and some of the possible impacts on society. Now, one of the things that was brought up just previously was automation and how that might affect the job market, how it might affect people's lifestyles. And it would be interesting to get your opinion. I mean, wouldn't it be nice to have like automatons like running around the lounge room, cleaning up after us, or doing the dishes and doing this, that, and the other?
Yeah, I mean, it would be, of course, unless that happens to be your job.
Hmm.
There is, if you start thinking about what robots can do, it can, pretty much replace almost anything you can imagine people doing.
Hmm.
And that, will be a severe disruption to our economy.
Hmm.
Now, I think an important way to look at it is, first of all, this is a good thing, right? Most people don't like their jobs, and if we can get machines to replace us, so we still get the same stuff and the same services, that's overall a good thing. And in terms of destroying jobs, let's say we have robot waiters, and
Hmm.
so, or we're spending less money at restaurants.
Okay.
It's true it will hurt people whose job it is to be a waiter, but then we have more money we'll be spending on other services. So there'll be a lot of disruptions, but it's not clear that this will result in mass unemployment necessarily. What I think is likely to happen is if we do have a lot of automation, it's going to make us very rich. And there'll be people where it won't be worth it for them to work. That will be so rich, and if people who will really, if all they can contribute is their physical labor, then it might just be we'll have a welfare state where a lot of people end up getting subsidies for the from the government. And so we might have that kind of future where the significant number of people are basically too rich to work, and that could be a good thing, I think.
Yeah, right. So, but I mean, like, it would be nice, but people might feel as though they don't have purpose, and like that's an issue that people bring up often. If they don't have, it's not contributing any sort of meaningful utility to the system which they belong to. Okay, they might get depressed about that and want to change,
Well,
but that's the choice that they can make, perhaps, if there are any jobs to do.
yeah. Well, no, you are right. I mean, people who are long-term unemployed, I mean, very bad things happen to their self-esteem. They tend to get depressed. It's psychologically awful. But of course, there are a vast number of people in rich countries who don't work. They're too young. They're too old. They're house husbands or housewives. They're children, or they're in college like I was till they're about 30 or
Hmm.
so.
Hmm.
So we certainly, I think it's important that we don't, if there's someone who isn't going to be able to get a job, maybe we'll live in a world where if you're in a rich country and your IQ is below 100, you're probably not going to work. We don't want to label that person as a loser. We want to have things for them to do that are considered honorable.
Hmm.
They can do art. They can be good citizens. They can go to school for a very long time. They can, raise their children.
Hmm.
So I think we sort of need to transform what's considered successful and what isn't.
Hmm. Interesting. Yeah.
But in some ways, we
People can
already have
provide.
that. I mean,
Yeah, we do. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we value culture and art, right?
yeah, and people spend a lot of time, retired.
Hmm.
I mean, if you look at the percent of people's lives that most people work, it's going down and down, and it's not considered. If people retire at 60 and you live to 90, that's not considered disgraceful by anybody.
Hmm. 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 Well, that's the thing. I mean, like, there's a strong culture to sort of. On one hand, there's a strong culture which wants to discount the utility of aesthetics,
Hmm.
or the utility of quote unquote non-utilitarian output. Right? I don't know if I can say that. Is that allowed?
Well,
So, but then on the other hand, there's how do you put a price? How do you measure the value of like a Mozart symphony, or a Vivaldi symphony, or the how do you measure the beauty in a painting? And these are things that people have done and have gotten paid for, but often do out of the love of their heart. They just want to do these sorts of things in forms of like creativity. And maybe in the future, we must, if there's going to be a lot of automation, we can probably reasonably say that there will be a lot more technology around us, and maybe the means to express one's creativity and derive like meaning and enjoyment out of these things will also be enhanced along with a lot of other things.
um,
So, yeah.
yeah, absolutely. If people participate in online communities, you'll be a guild master in World of Warcraft.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it's quite interesting. But the tension to me, or what's conflicting is, well, what will be the larger impact of automation? Will it be in the form of household robotics? Will we be sort of all cradled in a social safety net that sort of pays us to just be around for no particular reason except that we're agents in this society? Or will there be mass unemployment, which causes people to not have any finances to support themselves on, and we won't be able to support them through government incentives, or yeah, that we won't be able to. Well, we will choose a society not to support those people.
I have a feeling in democracies we'll end up with most people being supported. It might be through make work government jobs, or perhaps the government will outlaw animation in certain sectors. Like I think in New Jersey, you can't pump your own gas. It's grossly inefficient, but it creates jobs. We might have a lot more of that, where people have make work jobs if they want them.
Hmm.
Or we'll do things like, well, we'll have kindergartens. We'll have like one adult per every three kids or something. We'll create jobs that way.
Hmm. Well, then, is the measure of success of a society the happiness of the individuals in the society, or is it the utility that the society produces?
Well, that's a good question. I think happiness is dangerous because if we find a chemical way of making everyone really happy, we wouldn't say that's utopia, right? If we give everyone heroin and they're, fantastically happy, but their IQ goes to 50, I think we've failed. So I have a feeling we're going to get very good at increasing happiness in some ways through things like neurofeedback. And I
Yeah,
feel
so maybe, like as David Pearce suggests, we'll be able to engineer sort of gradients of bliss and remove needs for suffering as a motivational device. So I guess the bigger question for me is, how do we avoid a situation where there's some sort of race condition between all these societies, and the ones that win are the ones that are focused primarily on utility output at the expense of the happiness of the people in the societies.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about a prisoner's dilemma, and I don't think there's a way around that. I
Mm.
mean, especially if you look at eugenics, if you have some countries, maybe like Singapore, that says, "Hey, we're gonna go for intelligence," and that's you want to have a kid, you've got to use this genetic service, and we're going to pick genes for your kid who are going to be really smart. In other countries like America, where we forbid it, Singapore, or Chinese, they'll end up controlling the world.
Hmm.
And yeah, I think that's a very probable outcome,
Mm.
especially with the next generation,
Right.
especially with genetics. Yeah, we could have that. There could be a lot of countries that are just they become satisfied with what they have. I mean, you have that in Western Europe. In some ways, like some of the countries like Italy aren't really even trying to get economic growth. They're just trying to not deteriorate too much.
That's
So
it's interesting. I mean, there's been collapses before. I'm sure we'll see societal collapses in the future. I guess, how do we mitigate the negative effects of these sorts of things happening then? Like, yeah, will
well,
we live in a world where a lot of people have to like sort of live on the breadline in order for like society, yeah, or even die in order for progress, efficient
um,
or progress?
I don't see it that way. I think that there's going to be people who don't take the drugs that make them happy. They'd rather, learn math than take a drug that makes it feel like they've learned math.
Hmm.
And I think these people, if given the freedom, can be extraordinarily productive. My hope is that we don't try to restrict them. That I'd like to create a system where adults who decide to go on the World of Warcraft, take the drugs to make you happy, and don't really contribute anything, that
Hmm.
we let them do it, but we just make sure that they don't create tax systems where they take away too much from people who are productive.
Hmm.
So I think given the way people are, there's going to be a lot of human beings that would take the sort of the welfare benefits and the wireheading,
Hmm.
and I mean that's actually okay with me as long as they don't drag down the people who want to be very productive by
Hmm.
saying, oh no, we're not going to let anyone get too ahead of us, and if you're productive, you've got to pay 95% in taxes, or we'll put all these regulations. We won't let you invent robots that take the role of, say, taxi cab drivers, because we don't want to take away jobs from taxi cab drivers. So I'm sort of a libertarian. I would be happy if there's a big welfare state as long as we could still have very people who are productive, still be productive.
So, on one side, there's the idea that the market should be unbridled, and the market will actually determine where society goes. And so, really, it's a decision based on like market sort of movement. But
Yeah.
then there's also the problem of like like a large spikes making a doing damage to the long term sort of efficacy of the sustainability of society. And so, do you think that there needs to be a bit of both, like the market, listening to the market and seeing what it wants, but also having some form of like government regulation?
Well, I mean, I think there certainly needs to be regulations over things like weapons or, creating. I mean, it would be nice if we could have regulation over unfriendly artificial intelligences, but I don't know if our government's up to it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I I don't know. I mean, I'm very skeptical about the ability of government to regulate. I think it's possible to design ideal regulators who would improve markets,
Mm-hmm.
but outside of pollution, in which markets often don't work very well, I think government is more likely to do harm than good.
Mm-hmm.
And my goal, to the extent I have any influence, would be to try to, create sort of a safety net where you sort of placate most people, and you let the very productive individuals continue.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Um,
But I mean, you mentioned sustainability, and I don't think our civilization is sustainable. I think that, within a
in
hundred
its
years, we'll
current
either be
form, yeah.
gone or we'll start to colonize the universe. And I don't think we should try to go for sustainable. We should try to go for the positive singularity or
Yeah,
other.
yeah, yes, yes. I kind of am with you there. And by sustainability, I wasn't just limiting to like like trying to preserve the ecosystem in its current form. I think that it's worth like doing that as well. I think there's many sort of branches of, I guess that have branches of like I guess ethical imperatives that are valid. Because we don't know that we'll achieve a singularity. It may be that we need to sort of watch pollution and like make sure that the Earth is hospitable to our biological descendants, not just
Mhm.
our sort of artificial ones.
Yeah.
So, but like the thing is, for me, yeah, because there's so many possible futures, we need to focus on things that like are most probable and have the highest impact. And you mentioned
Right.
the singularity, and I think that that is quite a probable future if we don't destroy ourselves first. I can see plenty of reasons for convergence towards intelligence, even if strong AI or artificial general intelligence or an intelligence explosion isn't the long-term goal of like the I guess the maximal utility maximizing agent in the world, then even economic milestones get us there. It seems.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, over the long term, I mean, world economy goes at 5% a year. If over 1,000 years, you've achieved something spectacular. So if you look at time frame for like how long we've been on Earth or something, how long it's been
Yeah.
intelligent life on Earth, and we're headed towards something spectacular.
So do you want to explain what the singularity is to you, and what the important aspects of the intelligence singularity, the intelligence explosion, or the singularity or accelerating change are?
Sure. I define the singularity broadly. I just call it a threshold of time at which artificial intelligence or enhanced human intelligence have radically remade civilization. I do that because I'm uncertain over what kind of singularity we'll get. Whether it'll come through genetics or through the scariest kind would be someone writes a computer program that has human level intelligence, but the computer program has access to its own source code and figures out how to make itself smarter. And as it gets smarter, it figures out how to make itself even smarter. And you sort of have this intelligence explosion, and it quickly goes from the level of intelligence of me to something of godlike powers. And at that point, it gets to remake society however it wants.
Mm-hmm.
And the danger there is if our understanding of the laws of physics is correct, there's a limited amount of free energy in the universe, and we use free energy. So if this super intelligent AI doesn't have an explicit desire to be friendly towards humanity, it will kill us. It will kill us if it's indifferent to us. So I think there's a decent chance that that'll happen.
Mm, mm. So,
Because if you,
yeah.
I mean, if you look at most of the possible goals a super intelligent AI could have,
Hmm.
for most of the goals, we don't play a role in that. But we still use some of the free energy that the AI could use towards another goal. So for most possible goals a super intelligent AI could have, it would be in its self-interest to kill us.
Hmm.
And so
Or
that
just
means,
repurpose our matter. Yeah,
yeah,
in
yeah. I mean, if
effect,
it
killing
wants to
us, right?
calculate pi to as many digits as possible, well, my eating food interferes with that. It should kill me.
Mm,
And there's so many goals out there that don't involve humanity that, I think that's unfortunately, I think that's the most likely thing that's going to happen this century is that someone intentionally or accidentally creates an AI, it improves its own intelligence and wipes out mankind and does something basically that's boring, has
mm,
some goals we just don't think are evil or good, but
hmm.
it uses all the resources it can get to
A lot,
achieve them.
a lot of people are doubtful that machines will ever reach human scale or beyond. Um, what do you think some of the main points that people bring up in objection to the possibility of strong AI?
I think the only real objection is that there is a God and the God gave us a soul and we can't put that soul in machines. I mean, if you take the view of there's nothing magical about us, then if biology can create us, then so can machines.
Mm,
Then we can create machines that have something in us. I mean, you really have to go to the supernatural, I think, to make an argument that we couldn't create um, artificial intelligence that is as smart as human beings. I don't see anywhere because I mean we are machines. We can create people. You have a child that's you've created an intelligent life form.
mm,
We know from theoretical computer science that there's something called a Turing machine, a general purpose computer, and one general purpose computer can do whatever any other computer could do. So if you have a computer with enough computational power, it should be able to run my brain or Albert Einstein's brain, or run out Einstein's brain into a billion times as fast.
mm. That's interesting, yeah. There may be some sort of quantum stuff that classic von Neumann architectures can't achieve, but
If there
even.
is though, the computers could we could put that into our computers. I mean, if our brains use quantum computing, then that means it's easy. That means DNA somehow can form this quantum computer in a non-cold environment. I mean, there could be a quantum computer here, even though I go like this. That means they're easy to make. That makes it much more likely that some entrepreneur is going to create one.
Mm, mm, hmm.
It's only if God put a quantum computer in here and he made it so that no human being could ever figure it out that I would say, yeah, we're not going to be able to create super intelligent machines.
So it stands to reason, but to me that intelligence is powerful, but in order to elucidate the power of intelligence, often there we need to cite examples in our history as a human species, to show that, well, it's not just really brute force or being able to do anything specific like dig a hole or flap our arms. What is it about intelligence that makes it so powerful? Why is intelligence special?
Well, I mean, intelligence is the ability to solve problems, and it's special. I mean, it's given us control of Earth because we've been able to figure out, hints from the laws of physics and to make machines to use free energy to achieve our goals. It, I mean, I guess we've been able to figure out the rules of the universe and use them to design machines and design equipment that help us achieve things that we want to.
Hmm. And
So
you could strongly argue that that's probably the primary reason why we're sort of at the top of the food chain now,
yeah,
like and whether we because we weren't
right, right,
before, like the Paleolithic era. Yeah, right. We
right.
were actually in the middle somewhere. It's hypothesized pretty strongly that, or argued for pretty strongly that, like our ancestors were smart, but they weren't at the top of the food chain at all. At one stage, what we were doing is like peering over reeds, making sure that we weren't being chased, and watching other apex predators kill an animal. waiting for them to have their feed, then waiting again for the next level down sort of scavengers to have their feed on the carcass, then waiting for the next level down to get the little scraps in between the little nooks and crannies of bone, and then after all they've gone away and stuff, and they haven't really, there's nothing left on the carcass except the bone. We came along and smashed open the bones with rocks to get the marrow, right?
Yeah.
But we knew how to do that because we could conceive of what was inside a bone. We were also very
Right.
good at tracking. We could tell what a footprint looked like and which direction an animal was moving, whereas animals don't do that. They rely on their senses, like the power of smell and like really good hearing and eyesight and things like that.
Yeah, and we could transmit this information
Hmm.
generation to generation through language. I mean,
Yeah.
if a lion figures something out, it's not going to be able to tell its grandchildren. But we could do that. We could say, hey, there's stuff in the bone. Break it open, and you'll get something that tastes pretty good.
Mm. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's interesting. So, I mean, it seems as though even evolution has converged on intelligence in more than one branch of the phylogenetic tree, right? We're just
yeah,
one. We've got others which are in a similar branch, and they're like bonobos and great apes of various types. But then, what about things like the grey parrot from the corvid family?
no, you're right, and that's an argument people have made for why it should be easy to develop artificial intelligence. Because if you take the most common ancestor of humans and like octopuses or ravens, it wasn't very smart.
Hmm.
So evolution has managed to come up, the random process of evolution several times have come up with intelligence,
Hmm.
which makes it probably isn't that hard. It can't have been this 1 in 100 trillion thing that happened that we'll never figure out. It's something that happened several times.
Hmm. Yeah.
So
Right.
that makes it more likely we're going to figure it out.
Yes. Yeah. Well, evolution stumbled on like different morphologies, like wings.
Mhm.
The ancestors of bats and birds didn't have wings, but birds and bats both converged and developed wings. And the same with intelligence, like we were just describing. Maybe a little bit harder to stumble upon like advanced intelligence than wings, but because it seems like such a powerful factor in order for the survival, even just like the survival of the species through natural selection.
Yeah.
Evolution converges on that form of mutation to create bodily morphology that survives better in the environment with intelligence.
Yeah. Although the one counter argument is the Fermi paradox that if that's
Hmm.
true, why haven't we seen evidence of intelligence on other planets?
That's so hard to really. I agree, and it is a very perplexing thing. I don't know, but it could be that intelligences, once they reach a certain threshold, foom up, right, really quickly,
Yeah.
and then decide to do things that are very hard for us to predict. So it might be very unlikely that there'll be spacefaring Star Trek-like civilizations exploring the universe in bubbles made of I don't know, some sort of substrate, some sort of metal or whatnot. It could be that we just once we reach a certain level of intelligence, we decide to adapt ourselves and turn ourselves into sort of nanoparticle clouds, utility fog clouds, and explore the universe that way, or go down really small, like John Smart says in his STEM hypothesis, or we transcend and go to a more rich form of physics, which we can somehow branch to another universe or whatnot that supports even greater levels of intelligence than this simple form of physics we might have in this universe. I don't know, but it is a cause for concern. If it, like Nick Bostrom talks about it, the filtering process, right?
Right.
It could be that there's a filter just beyond where we are now, which
Yeah,
is,
we destroy ourselves.
yeah,
Yeah.
maybe that we should be careful because that may be the likely outcome for humanity. And so that's an argument to be careful about how we progress.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it is. If you take that to logical conclusion, it's like the natural path is that we destroy ourselves, but we don't know why. So in some ways, you could actually argue we should be taking wild chances.
Hmm.
It's like if someone's holding a gun to your head and like I'm going to kill you in a few seconds,
Hmm.
that's the time to just jump or do something crazy, or else you're dead. And maybe we're in that situation.
Hmm.
Maybe we should look at the universe and say, "Gosh, there doesn't seem to be anything special about how we've gotten here so far, but yet." there isn't any intelligent life, so we're probably doomed unless we do something crazy. What is it?
Mm,
I
mm.
don't know.
Yeah, it's hard to know.
So I think we
Um,
should try to get off the planet as soon as we can, in a way where we can, sustain ourselves, in a way where we can survive, even if we destroy our planet.
yeah, definitely. That's a really good argument for resiliency.
Yeah,
If like one colony dies, then there's still another colony, and then like if we do get advanced enough, we can always like back up our own selves. So, if our I guess runtime intelligence is sort of operating on a planet that just explodes or suddenly just gets like swallowed by a black hole or something ridiculous,
yeah,
then we still can like refer back to a backup and turn that into a runtime sort of intelligence. Yeah.
yeah,
So I'm looking forward to being able to do that.
yeah. I
However
think that's the
strange it
main
might
task
seem
of our
today.
that's the main task of our generation now, is just is to get off the planet, is to, as you say, create a backup
Hmm.
of our civilization.
Let's talk about like well, is there an ethical imperative, do you think, to like move towards something like an intelligence explosion? Or would you say that I won't say imperative? Would you say that there's an ethical reason to do so?
Well, yeah, I mean, if intelligence is the ability to solve problems, so if we were smarter, I mean, anything you care about, we would do better. We could do better at solving that problem. So if you think we could create an intelligence that was friendly towards our values, then absolutely. I mean, think how much suffering there is in the world that we could end, and not just among humans, among animals as well. And if we achieve very smart, AIs, they could help us solve so many problems.
Hmm.
Now, unfortunately, if they're not friendly to us, it can go badly.
Mm, mm.
But
So yeah, this imperative to reduce suffering could be, I guess, helped a lot by having more intelligence to solve the problems. I mean, the more complex the problem is, often the more intelligence is needed in order to solve the problem. So
yes,
yeah, any problem that can be sort of aided with more intelligence applied to its solution, um, is candidate problem for being solved by something that comes from an intelligence explosion.
yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, even the big one is, of course, death. I mean, I think that's probably going to
Yeah.
be solvable, and
Yeah, I hope so.
it's just so horrible. I mean, it's, hundreds of thousands of people die every day. So if you delay an intelligence explosion that gives us immortality by a year, there's so many lives that are permanently lost, unless I guess we discover time travel.
Hmm.
I mean, it's I guess people sort of accept death, but as transhumanists, we don't have to.
Hmm. Hmm. That's true. I think. Well, there's the reasons. I mean, we're sort of like we're really just sort of still, I guess, primitive in the way that we approach
Yeah, we're
solutions to
cavemen.
problems,
Yeah.
and so we're cavemen. And our acceptance of death is really like a form of denial, which on one hand is bad because it reduces the likelihood we can actually solve the problems associated with death. But for those experiencing the existential angst of, not the possibly not being around, or most probably not being around, in the future, sometimes denialism it can be psychologically satisfying.
Yeah, I mean, death is so terrifying that it's better not to focus too much on it. Of course, since given cryonics, if
That's
it's
true.
sad to not worry about death, and then to not sign up for cryonics, and then to lose out on the chance of living forever. That's quite horrible.
Mm, yeah.
So there's a case where ignoring the possibility of death, or pretending it wouldn't be that bad, really will hurt you.
Hmm.
Of course, almost nobody does cryonics, which is quite crazy, I think. But
Hmm. Yeah. Cryonics is getting more and more feasible. The technology is getting better all the time. I think what might happen is we'll be able to show how cryonics works by doing it to a rat or something. We'll have an
yes,
existence proof of some basic form of cryonics, Of course, it's going to be much harder to revive and like a living life form using the techniques that we use today with the technology that using the techniques that we use to suspend the organism today is obviously going to be a whole lot more low tech than the technology required to revive the organism.
Right,
And
right,
so that's a whole bet. Like, if we assume that we have the inadequate technology today to be able to suspend an organism, um, and hope for advances in technology, which I think is a pretty good bet in the future, then maybe we can, put a fair enough bet on the likelihood of tomorrow, or I mean, not tomorrow, but like in the next 100 or 200 or 1,000 years, to have technology so advanced that it will be able to bring back a life form that's
right.
suspended, as long as we preserve enough patterns,
Exactly.
especially with
Yeah.
relation to intelligence and identity.
Yeah, keep enough of the brain structure.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I think it's a pretty good bet. And so maybe the further and further we progress with the technologies of suspension, the more and more it'll sort of be brought up in cultural situations. People see it on TV. Maybe we'll be able to show some form of example of how it can be done through like reviving a mouse or something like that, or reviving some form of whole organisms. But yeah, I'm hoping that that'll sort of increase people's want for these sorts of technologies. The more people spend money on doing these sorts of things, the more that we'll have to research. More funds will have to pay people to
Right.
research it, right?
Yeah, we need some more high status people setting up for cryonics to make it more acceptable.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. But there are some animals out there that seem to go through periods of suspension, like
Yeah,
frogs.
they do. There's a type of frog, I think, that
Yeah,
does that. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Did you
Yeah,
did
so evolution's figured it out.
Yeah,
So,
in a sense, but I don't know. Like it may be that the pattern which needs to be sort of suspended isn't as complex or as sort of massively like complex as ours. And so if we were to be suspended in the same way as a frog, we might not come out like the human that we once were.
no, I think the bigger the thing you're freezing, the much harder it gets.
Yeah, yeah,
So you can't conclude from a frog can do it, therefore we must be able to if we just knew how.
yeah. Mm.
But
But there is existence proofs to say that it can be done with a living organism, and nature has
absolutely.
shown us that. Do you remember those sea monkey packets? You remember getting like packets of sea monkeys?
I don't know if I've got them. I know what they are, but
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I remember when I was a kid, I was given this packet of like dust, and I looked at it and it was all dry and it came all sealed in a nice plastic thing, and then, I put it in water and, not too long later there was these organisms swimming around and doing this, that, and the other. I'm sure they weren't really aware of their existence while they were in sort of like a frozen or dehydrated form, but afterwards they probably would have had some sort of modicum of awareness.
Mhm.
Yeah, so that's interesting. That we can say that it's possible in nature for simpler life forms. Maybe with technology we'll be able to do that with complex life forms like our own. Um, yeah. Anyway, so let's talk about then economics and what we can expect from humans today in the future. So, well, we've spoken about like the agents in society and their utility. Should economists assume models of the neoclassical rational agent model, which is where all agents have very clear preferences about what they want, and without falter choose to perform these like choose goals which optimally achieve these preferences,
Well,
or
I think
this rational choice theory, that predict human cooperation, all those sorts of things.
it's a pretty good first approximation.
Hmm.
I mean, the problem is there's so many different ways of being irrational that if you introduce that into your model, you just have too many parameters and you can pretty much get any result you want. And so when you assume people are rational, it limits your model and you can get some, very important testable predictions. I mean, the best are in finance, where our models of finance aren't perfect, but they're pretty good. And
Mm.
we can make a lot of other good predictions as well. Um, So I think there is a lot to be said for those models. Yeah, they certainly can be improved, but
Mm.
and they don't require. I mean, they still work pretty well, even if people aren't perfectly rational. I mean, essentially, if you like money and you'd rather have free time than not have free time, and the price of a good goes down, you're more likely to buy it. Just do
Mm.
very simple things, you can get some nice results.
Mm. I mean, like, do you think it's fair enough to like apply this model to like
Oh,
nuclear proliferation or the mutually assured destruction?
um, could you? Sorry, I'm just wait a
Okay,
second.
yep,
Sorry,
yep.
Alex, I'm doing an interview. Please wait. Uh, Sorry about that. That was my son, who
Okay.
my 8-year-old son, who is
He wants to play.
like it's yes.
Fair enough.
Um, well, I think there are some. The models aren't perfect, but you're talking now, I think, about game theory,
Mm.
and there are some important results from game theory that do apply to nuclear proliferation. You can get some, you can get some interesting results. For example, in terms of making threats, like President Obama got in a bit of trouble where he said that, he said there's going to be a red line with Syria. If Syria uses chemical weapons, we're going to get involved. And then Syria actually did use chemical weapons, and people are like saying, "Hey, now you have to do something," even though he didn't really want to. And he ended up trying to get involved. But I mean, I think the reason he had to get involved was because of game theory. There's a lot of game theory on threats, and you want to be able to make your threat credible.
Mm-hmm.
So I think those some of those models are kind of effective.
Mm-hmm.
They're not perfect, but human behavior is so complex that you're never going to. It would require a super intelligent AI basically to have a perfectly accurate model of human beings.
Right, yeah. Well, where do you think, like, let's just say we don't achieve a super intelligence. Well, at least until we do, how can we improve these models for making better predictions about human behavior?
Sure. Well, the way is with big data. That's I think that the big change in economics now is we're getting using bigger and bigger databases to try to come up with better and better predictions.
Mm-hmm.
My understanding is a lot of guys don't even worry about the microeconomic theory. What a lot of economists, their skill set is they understand statistics really well and they understand messy data, and they can sort of use that to make predictions as to how people will behave or not. I have a feeling genetic testing is going to have a big effect on economics. That once most people have their genome sequenced, and you connect that with databases, you're going to be able to get a lot of predicting what people will do based on their genetics. That's just my personal guess.
Hmm.
You also probably get, if neurofeedback does become more popular, there'll be a lot of data there about how individual brains operate, and you can connect that, and you'll have running these giant computer programs looking for patterns.
Hmm.
The first people who do this will be people trying to predict stock movements and people trying to sell you stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So they'll have a very strong incentive to.
Right. Yeah.
Actually, one of the people who just won a Nobel Prize in economics, Lars Hansen, he developed this very complicated statistical model called general methods of moments.
Yes.
And it's not microeconomic theory given rational people. It's how do you use statistical data sets to figure out what's going on.
Okay.
So.
Yeah. Well, what do you think? Back to the singularity. So, look, there's been a lot of people who hate the idea, who don't like the idea of a singularity. Because sometimes they think because it's just very implausible. So, what do you think the strongest arguments against the singularity are, or against the singularity not happening in the near future? We've sort of spoken about like one previously earlier on, but I think it's important to.
Well, I mean, the absurdity heuristic, that most things that sound absurd really are absurd.
Mm.
And this does sound crazy. Another argument is that the best way to predict the future is to look at the past and to say, well, trends will continue. So if you look at the past 100 years or so, well, we've got economic growth, 2.5%, 3% a year in rich countries. Poor countries either stagnate or they figure out how to do what the rich countries are doing. So you'll say, gee, looking at the past, I'll predict the future. U.S. will grow at 2.5%, on average a year. There'll be some disruptions. There'll be a revolution somewhere, but usually the best way to predict again the future is just to look at the past and take linear trends. Linear models do better jobs than experts, And a linear model does not give us a singularity.
Hmm.
Right? You need exponentials. You need exponentials somewhere, or sharp breaks.
Hmm. Then are you at odds with Kurzweil's view of the future based on exponential growth?
No, I think that we'll Kurzweil, the technology would give us what Kurzweil is saying, where we merge with machines, if we don't get something else first.
Hmm.
If we don't first figure out how to create the super intelligent AI,
Hmm.
or if we don't first figure out how to download our brains into computers.
Hmm.
But I think that that's something that will eventually happen. That we'll be putting Google Glass is obviously the next step, where we're wearing glasses, and then we'll be putting things into our permanently into our ears and our eyes, and I think that will happen if something doesn't interrupt it. And the thing that interrupted it would be something even better, where we say, just the heck with why are you dealing with the brain? Why are you dealing with meat? Just go right into the dynanoid computing crystal, because that can survive, and I don't know, it's much more robust and work faster. Or we get the AI, which is like, I don't want this stupid meat. You can't do anything for me. I'm calculating pi to as many digits as I can. You're of no value. I'll get something better.
Yeah.
So
like does the absurdity heuristic does sound appealing?
And most of the time it's right.
Right. Like
most absurd ideas don't pan out.
But it is still a heuristic, right? And the
Yes,
problem with heuristics is they don't always apply.
No, they don't. But since we're not perfectly rational agents, we have to unfortunately rely on heuristics.
Yeah, well, we do. However, we can be rational about which heuristics we need to sort of we need to like test beyond. Like the idea of a singularity, even if you think that it's such like a low probability of a singularity happening, you still then have to balance the expected utility of a singularity, or the expected outcome, and with the low probability, should you decide to give it like 1%. Okay.
Oh, definitely. I mean,
even if you assign
1%
that
chance of
1%
super intelligence.
It's still like a really, 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 really big issue, considering the expected utility from such. However, I think 1% chance is very, very low. I think it's unwarranted to really assign that probability unless you have a strong basis for believing that intelligence isn't computable, for instance, or that it's too complex for us to do it in the near term.
No, I agree. I think you need to go to the supernatural, because we kind of know how complex DNA is, and there's nothing like, there's not a hidden component of our brain. It's not like there's some extra dimension we haven't visited yet, and maybe it's gigantic. We can see it.
Yeah. It's unfortunate that a lot of people see the mind. I guess intuitively see the mind as like some sort of separate magisterium. Do you think that a lot of people naturally are dualists?
Well, yeah, most people believe in God, and they believe there's a God, like, we're part God and part animal.
Yeah.
So that's the majority of mankind. So yeah.
Well, what do you think? What do you think some speed bumps to achieving a technological singularity could be? What are some common ones?
Well, the big one would be, civilization-wide problems, a virus that wipes out most of us, wars, runaway global warming. The current slowdown in the economic growth rate is quite troubling. I mean, our economy is doing much worse now than you would expect it to be in this position 10 years ago. A more mundane level, I guess, if simply saying Moore's law is breaking down, that will postpone it. Postpone the singularity. A big issue, I think, is going to be in terms of eugenics, in terms of how easy it would be to increase human intelligence. We'll probably figure out in the next 10 years, maybe in the next 2 or 3, what makes some people a lot smarter than others. And we might think, oh, this is the reason. Oh, guess what? We can, best case is, we can make people who aren't very smart, or we can figure out how to put this intelligence in kids. But if it turns out, for example, that you can't genetically engineer geniuses, because maybe given Einstein's genes, there was a 99% chance he would be crazy. And he just got really, really lucky. And there's no way around that. There's this massive trade-off with evolution, and you don't get Einsteins unless you're willing to pay this huge price. then that would be bad. If it turns out no, you made 100 clones of Einstein, 50 of them would be super geniuses. Well,
Mm.
we can clone other mammals. We'll be able to clone our current super geniuses.
Yeah. I mean,
I
that would
mean,
be amazing. We could.
yeah. Well, that's in some ways that's like the low tech path to a singularity. If we
Mm.
just take the smartest people on Earth, we clone them, we make sure they get good education and nice food, and it turns out even half of them, are as smart as their originals, will do quite well.
People have questioned whether, whether it's practical for organizations to pursue this goal of intelligence, of I guess, affecting the likelihood of bio, yeah. So there's this organization in China, just outside Beijing, where I was just recently, who are working on this genetics problem. What are the
Yes.
alleles associated with intelligence, and if we can find them, can we modify? Can we, I guess, can they modify these alleles to make people on balance more intelligent? And will this have trade-offs elsewhere in the genome?
Yeah.
Does just switch is it going to be a problem of just switching on the right alleles or just increasing their potential? Or is it like a really, really big complex problem where it's not just one, two, or three, but a combination of patterns of alleles that need to be
You know,
addressed?
in some ways, Barack Obama is proof that it can't be that complex, right? President Obama, he's whatever you think of his politics, he is pretty smart.
Yes.
His parents, he has an African father and a Caucasian mother, so his parents probably haven't had a common ancestor for quite a while.
Yeah.
So if there was all these complex patterns, if you took two people that were really genetically very distinct and they had a kid, their kid would be messed up. It would be like taking parts from two very different cars and putting them together. It wouldn't work. But since two people, are very genetically distinct and have a very smart kid, that's a sign there's a lot of sort of linearity going on. That it's like, this gene makes you a bit smarter and this gene doesn't.
Wow.
But what I think is from what I've heard, just basically from blogs, is that it might turn out that a lot of difference in intelligence comes down to genetic load. And your genetic load are basically the sum of your harmful genes. And most harmful genes are rare because evolution's continually editing them out. So it could be a really smart person is someone who is very average, actually, because most of the ways you deviate from the average are bad. So all we have to do to create a super genius is to create someone, someone who has average genes.
Wow.
And if you have average genes, you don't have these rare harmful mutations. So if all of us have, say, 200, on average, let's say we have 200 rare harmful mutations, and the smartest among us have only 150. If you got someone, you could edit the genome and get someone down to zero, and they would be smarter, better looking, happier than anyone who's ever existed, and give us a singularity. So maybe we'll find out. The Chinese will find that out, and in 10 years they'll start to create these kids, and 15 years after that, the kids will be writing computer programs and doing physics and take over the world.
Yeah, well, I've honestly never really thought about it that way. Actually, that's very interesting. So yeah,
that's actually. I wonder. I bet transhumanists might end up having the biggest impact on mankind through their children, because we'll be the kinds of people who, when we have kids, two transhumanists marry, right, and they have children, they're going to be looking at this technology, so they'll be the early adapters. So maybe it'll be the children of transhumanists. They'll be the first ones with the IQs of 200.
Yes.
And they'll be the ones who write the code that ends up taking over the world. And that's how we'll end up mattering.
Wow.
In terms of, we'll be the ones who experiment with our kids this way. And we'll be the ones who, our kids get the latest nutrition and brain training programs and stuff. We're not there. I don't think it can make enough of a difference right now, but in 10 years, maybe. So the 20-year-old transhumanists who are dating, 10 years from now, they'll be having the kids, and these kids will be the ones, and their values will dominate and take over the world. I think that's one possible theory, but...
Wow, that's interesting. So, yeah. Well, let's talk about, we touched on friendly AI before. Now, yeah, I think it's good to talk about this because, especially since you're part of you've one of the advisors to Mary, right?
Yes.
So, what is the problem of friendly AI then? What can you describe it? What's the best way to describe it to somebody who's never heard it before?
Okay. The premise is that you're going to have an intelligent computer program, and this program will be able to modify its own code. It'll be able to access its own software, and make very quick changes to itself. This means it won't be stable,
Hmm.
right? If it's intelligent and it has goals, one of the goals will probably be to make itself better. Just as if you could make yourself smarter or healthier or better looking, you probably do it. For most goals you might have, being better would help you. So if we get a computer program that's as smart as a person, and the program can access its own code, it'll make changes, probably. But when it makes changes, it'll be smarter, more powerful, but also might change its values. And this can be very dangerous. So we create something, a human level intelligence in a machine, and in a few days later, a few years, a few hours, suddenly it's much smarter and it cares about different things. So the goal of some people in the Singularity community, of the Machine Intelligence Research Institute people, is to try to come up with some mathematical proof that you have a program that, although it'll modify itself to become smarter, its values won't change too much, or its values won't go in a direction that we don't want. And it'll sort of bootstrap itself. It'll figure out how to get smarter, but as it gets smarter, it'll want to preserve its own friendliness. Just as if I wouldn't take a pill that would cause me to hate my son, right? Even if it made me smarter, I wouldn't do that because that goes against my current values. So if we can do the same thing with a computer program, we can create a computer program that's smart, but it uses its own intelligence to make sure that when it changes itself, it doesn't change its values, because that would be betraying its existing values. Then as it gets smarter and smarter, it can use its own intelligence to figure out ways in being friendlier and friendlier to us, and give us a utopia. And ideally, this computer program would understand us better than we do. And so it would create a world better than anything we can currently imagine. And that this is the goal. And unfortunately, it might not be possible, and maybe we're doomed. I don't know, but at least it's worth trying.
Yeah, for
and
sure.
The danger, of course, is that somebody creates the first artificial intelligence is designed to look at stock patterns, and it gets smarter, but its goal is to figure out better stock patterns. And it eventually gets to the point where it says, hey, I can do even better figuring out stock patterns if I use all the molecules in people. I want to convert the entire solar system into hardware so I can better figure out stock patterns. And it does that. We're dead. And that's the danger is, if there is a limited amount of free energy in the universe, that if an AI isn't friendly towards us, it will want to kill us. And we certainly see that in terms of evolution. I mean, evolution is not very kind. Right? One species does better, it takes over the niche, it kills all the competitors, and and then people do that too. I mean, it's like when Cortez discovered went to the New World, he quite happily killed the natives or enslaved them.
Yeah.
And we're quite willing to get rid of a lot of other species that get in our way. So the sort of natural path is not promising. We've got to change that.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. I've heard about the stories of some of the shocking stories. I got told one last night that sort of freaked me out. I don't want to mention it. It's just too horrible. But yeah, it's quite unsettling to look back at history, and also look back at the evidence of extinction that followed human migration patterns around the world before we were.
I mean, we're here because our ancestors killed people who killed people who killed people. I mean, there's a lot of genocide, and we're the children of that. And we're probably starting to see, there's going to be a lot of genetic evidence of that. That the first people in Europe were mostly wiped out by the second people, or wiped out by the third, and probably wiped out with spears and stones. Now we're creating something smarter than us. Well, that's not a.
So if in order to reduce the likelihood of having an AI that has cross-purpose goals in a dangerous way to our own, how do we then maintain that as we grow and become more intelligent, as we augment ourselves, or the AI might even augment us? There's a hypothesis written by Eliezer Yudkowsky, like the Coherent extrapolated volition.
Yes.
So, what would an AI? How would an AI extrapolate our possible goals, given that we were more moral, more smart, have more resources?
Yeah. Well, what it could do is it could actually create a computer simulation of that better person.
Mm.
So it creates you, and then it says, all right, you got these irrationalities, and you don't understand certain things. So I'm going to create a new version of you that really understands physics and has thought about philosophy a lot more than you, and asked it what it wants. And maybe this new one would want to be smarter. Okay, I'll create the version that wants to be smarter. What does this smarter one want? And I'll keep going and going until I've reached the end.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'll ask it what it wants.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll take that and I'll say, I'm now going to give that to you.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe you're horrified by what I'm going to give you, but a much smarter, nicer, wiser version of you wants it, so that's what you're going to get.
Mm-hmm.
And the hope is that there's enough similarity among all humanity that if we were all more smarter and more rational and wise, we kind of want sort of the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
So there wouldn't be this massive conflict. And so this AI could create something that most of us would view as utopia. That's the dream, I think. It's a dream worth pursuing.
Yeah, that's interesting. What I find difficult to know is how do you determine the point between, like, which part on the continuum between where we are now and all possible intelligences we could reach, or all levels of intelligence we could reach. So if we decide on, like, what would be in 10,000 years or 10 million years, it's like it's like we'd never it turns into a problem of infinite, like, progress. At
Yeah,
which
I guess it's
stage
like
do we extrapolate from?
yeah, it's like summing an infinite series. It could converge, but it might explode. And you're right. It might be that this machine's like, hey, I have no idea. This is completely arbitrary. I could make you smarter this way, and you'll want this, but I can make you smarter this way, and you'll want this. And I'm sorry, it's completely arbitrary. And yeah, that's right. We don't know. That's another possible. But it would seem it wouldn't be that hard if it cared about us to make something much, much better than we have now. I mean, a lot better.
Mm-hmm.
And that maybe there's no such thing as like the best, and that's not well defined. But it would seem pretty easy to define, to create a universe in which every single person alive now is much, much happier with it. And it's just not even close.
Yeah.
It doesn't, I mean, I think I could do that if I had, like, some like magical powers from the Harry Potter world or something. And if we're talking about something that really is much, much smarter than us, it should be able to create an environment that we really like. It might not want to. I think that's the major problem, is it might not want to. But it would seem it would have the ability to do that.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So we've spoken about, like, some decelerators. We've spoken about a bit about the coherent extrapolated volition, and I really should have brought this up before. But what are the possibilities for accelerators to the singularity? What sort of signals or signs would you say, like, would accelerate the progress towards AI? Also, if there was anything that if there was a headline in the news that would make you believe that the singularity was even closer, what forms would this headline likely take?
Maybe something like a best-selling novel was written by a computer program.
Mm-hmm.
Something, or a hedge fund announces, yeah, it's just computer programs. The best hedge fund is like, yeah, we just have computer programs do everything. Or something more mundane is that a program called the game Go, the computer is the best at it, or something. Another way, on the hardware side, it could be that some of the firms trying to develop quantum computers succeed, and they say, we've got something that can just, it's so much better than anything before. So I think...
Yeah, what about advances in neuroscience?
I guess if there were ways of showing you made people significantly smarter by stimulating certain parts of their brain, it's hard to imagine that'll produce super genius. I think that'll make people incrementally smarter, but I doubt that would result in everyone being sort of a super genius. Although another more mundane way might be someone like Larry Page saying, you know what, I'm going to spend $10 billion trying to create artificial general intelligence.
Right.
That's going to be my legacy,
Yeah. Like the Calico announcement, right? So
yeah. Someone says, well, I think, I'm going to do this. I'm going to hire the smartest people in the world to create, human level AI.
Yeah. It's got to come up sometime. So Here's the thing about like neuroscience, which seems attractive. It's just we don't understand the problem of computable general intelligence. We know that we've got like a mathematical formula. Marcus Hutter has got his universal AI formalization of intelligence, but it requires infinite resources because it's
Yes.
exponentials on exponentials on exponentials. But yeah, so what we really need is like some form of like example of how we do it, perhaps. And
Right.
that could be like, let's just say we work out, well, here's how humans do it, and that suddenly gets out into the news. We may be able to sort of extrapolate this into some like formal code and make
Yeah.
computers do it. And if let's just say if even if the AI was not like very IQ savvy at first, if it had the intelligence of, let's say, even some subhuman, like like a rhesus monkey, if it had a like some parts of its intelligence were incredibly augmented, like memory, and the ability to sift through massive amounts of like data and find patterns, and it might be able to bootstrap itself from a subhuman form through to superhuman in hardly much time at all, given the right amount of computation resources and the right algorithms.
Yeah, no, you're right. If we can get even a primitive human brain, I mean, if once you could establish it could be done, people could keep throwing computer resources at it, or even just make random changes and test it.
Hmm.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's definitely true. There might not be much time that elapses between like the first human level
Yeah.
computer and something super, super intelligent, which is scary.
That's true. I think Werner Vinci said something to the effect, in answer to a question. So when do you think we'll be able to achieve human level intelligence? And when will this happen? He said it might. Well, he said something to the effect. What was it? It might happen in the next like 30 to 40 years or something, but it'll only be very brief that it achieves
Yes.
human level intelligence. So,
If for
I
no
mean,
other reason than for the military, I mean, places like DARPA or the Chinese intelligence service are going to like, hey, this, you create a super intelligence, you control the world. Let's do it before our enemies do.
mm, yeah.
So you're going to have this arms race.
Oh, arms races. Yeah, let's talk about the possibility of that. That sounds scary. Let's
And
scare our
military can
viewers.
military can throw $100 billion at a problem. I mean, they can put more money even than, even Larry Page or something. So if
Mm,
if a military decides this is feasible and this gives you domination of the world, they'll do it. And what
mm,
scares me is you might have various governments say, you know what, it'd be best for mankind if we went slowly, but if we go slowly and the other guys don't, they'll either win or they'll destroy the world, and
mm,
I don't want to let that happen. So we'll take chances and we'll cut corners. And then the
mm,
other side says, well, we've got to cut corners because they're cutting corners, and everyone
mm,
does it, and everyone goes quickly, recognizing that chances are it'll end up destroying the world,
mm.
but that's just the logic of game theory.
Yeah, I know.
It's
It sounds like a
lots
like
of
a horrid race
politicians.
condition towards like destruction, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So I guess it's important that organisations like the Future of Humanity Institute and MIRI and this new Cambridge one are working on solutions to these forms of
Mhm.
problems, because that's an existential risk which is quite probable in my eyes anyway. So yeah, let's just say like MIRI or somebody does create a formalization of friendliness.
Uh-huh.
It still may not be the case that people decide to use that, because it might
Right.
actually slow down the AI
Yeah.
which uses this theory
You're
of
right. I mean, they
friendliness.
want to impose a big constraint on AI, and whenever you impose a constraint, you necessarily slow down what you're doing.
Hmm.
So yeah, they're at a big handicap compared to an organization that won't care as much about friendliness.
Hmm.
Of course, part of the hope is that an AI, it might be that you don't have the option. It's either friendly or it kills you. It's hard to create one that sort of serves your needs and is your slave, because it'll just be too smart for that.
Hmm.
So it might be the case where all the world governments like, let's create an AI, but really we don't have the option of creating one that'll turn the world and let us have dominion over the world. We really just have the option of creating one that's going to take over the world, and it'll treat everyone kind of equally.
Hmm.
Just as the humans don't really distinguish among ants, this AI isn't going to distinguish among people. So maybe in that case, everyone will realize friendliness is the only hope.
Hmm.
But
Yeah.
but who knows? I mean, I guess that maybe our best chance is if most people don't really worry about the problem, and Mira or someone figures out the solution before the big players, the militaries, decide to get in the game. Maybe the absurdity heuristic will save us. And Chinese intelligence, what do you mean create a super intelligent computer? That's crazy. Why would we?
When we do
Science
that.
fiction can't do that.
That's interesting. So yeah, if maybe the safest bet with AI is to develop a theory of like ethics or morality or friendliness first, and then only have one organization try and implement
Yeah.
that into an AI, well, everybody else just stands by and watches, and does not try to compete.
Although we need a lot of monitoring for that. Maybe we
Yeah,
should be thankful that the NSA is monitoring so much of what we do. Although
maybe.
another path is if we can't get this for another 20 years, I do think eugenics will kick in, and
Mm,
maybe we'll have another generation of people who are much smarter than we are, and they'll be better at solving this problem.
yeah, yeah, that's
And it's
true.
possible we'll get eugenics for morality as well.
Yeah,
It
Julian
seems
Savulescu
likely.
talks a lot about that. You know who he is? Yeah,
Sorry, I didn't hear.
Julian Savulescu. No,
No.
he's sort of argued that we're not fit for the future. It is in a book called Unfit for the Future. In fact, there's a smaller essay out there. It's definitely worth a read.
Okay.
He's a bit of a provocateur, but I think he does bring home some very interesting points. Definitely worth a read. The other thing is like if I was thinking before like if if we're trying to avoid a race condition in like I guess singleton AI is trying to well they wouldn't be singleton then AI is trying to compete for power.
Right.
Maybe we ought to create something like a nanny AI that isn't meant to spawn a singularity, or isn't meant to like wasn't designed from the ground up to be the ultimate AI or whatnot, but does sort of monitor all sort of AI activity, or some sort of like AI social safety net, or
Yeah.
that
The
Steve
danger there,
Alejandro.
though, is that it might be that it's just as hard to create a friendly AI as it is to create one of those.
Yeah.
Because if the nanny AI was smart enough to watch us, it would be smart enough to update itself, and it'd have to not want to. But if you can already create something that doesn't want to update itself to take over the world, then in some ways you can say, well, why don't you update yourself and take over the world,
Mm.
right?
But you wouldn't have to create like you could if you wanted to create the nanny AI, which was completely benign. Of course, you wouldn't give it the goals to update itself, or and you also wouldn't give it the goals to take over the world. But here's the problem: as soon as you give an AI a goal, instrumental goals fall out of that could be dangerous. So, like Steve
Exactly. Yeah.
Omohundro's basic AI drives are very interesting. Like, you want to preserve your resources, you want to
Right.
preserve the access to resources, you want to eliminate competition, you want to be able to harvest more resources, and then increase your own efficacy. But even if you could like sort of scrub out by design a few of those, you'd need to be careful, right?
Mm. Yeah, you would. You don't know what it'll decide. I mean, maybe it's the best way to stop people from creating another AI is to kill most of us or reduce our IQ by quite a bit.
Yeah, yeah. So it kind of almost would have to be sort of general, but you'd have to build some form of expert system goal into it that's very rigid and obeys distinct rules rather than tries to like learn and stumble upon them through some form of evolution or whatnot. Yeah. Mm,
Yeah. It might even be easier just to limit the hardware that everyone has access to, because
yeah.
it's not that easy to create computer chips. It's not like, growing marijuana or something. If there was, if, 5 or 6 leading countries were to say, look, we're really worried about this. We're going to monitor people who can have access to really powerful computers. It
Yes.
would be very hard for, a few individuals to get together and to make their own computer chips.
Mm,
So that might be the easiest way, is just to try to limit the hardware.
yeah. It could be. But I don't know. Like it could be the case. It may be the case that um, the best algorithm for AI may run on an Apple II,
Yeah.
or on an iPhone or something, right?
Yeah, no, that's certainly true, but at least you'd be giving a big advantage to
Sure.
your team if you said you guys get to have access to hardware that's a million times faster than what anyone else has.
Hmm.
Plus, of course, again, I mean, I think we're likely, unfortunately, for many reasons, we're moving into a surveillance state capacity where it's likely we'll have computer programs that can monitor anyone all the time, and it might not be that hard for people to monitor everyone who's running computer programs, and even to look at your brain state to know, is anyone trying to take over the world?
Hmm.
Is anyone trying to design this computer program? It might not be that hard to figure that out.
Yeah, yeah. So do you then? I mean, it's very hard to sort of know what the right course of action is. I mean,
Mhm.
if there is a police state, like a one world government with a police state, as if this world government theoretically does have the right motives, then maybe
Right.
that's the safest path towards a singularity. But how do you
Yeah, I
guarantee
mean,
that
a
that's?
wise king is always the best, but it's unfortunately not all kings are wise.
Mm, mm. Well, then, what? How do we achieve? If we were to achieve like the trying to if we were to work towards increasing likelihood of um, having a friendly government, how do we do that?
Uh, I think we're really far away. I mean, at an individual level, from the point of view of the viewers and for
Mm,
you and me, I would say probably to donate to organizations that are trying to make incremental progress.
mm, yeah.
You
So
know,
organisations like Mary, Future of
yeah,
Humanity Institute. Yeah.
yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, that's probably the way most. I mean, you can do a little bit of good. Um, I mean, you can't. It's hard to imagine a politician talking about unfriendly artificial intelligence and the
Mm,
existential risk that poses to mankind.
mm. In most people, it's just not on the radar, and people don't think about these sorts of things, or like with the aging phenomenon, are prefer to be in denial because it's too
Right.
stressful to sort of think about these sorts of things day in day out for a lot of people.
Yeah, I think our realistic best hope is that people like Peter Thiel or Larry Page will play a leading role, and they'll talk to politicians, or they'll use their influence, and they'll get us a good outcome, and most of the rest of us will can kind of support them.
Hmm.
You know.
There's an organisation called CFA, that's the Centre for Applied Rationality. Now you've had
Yes.
some like in sort of contributions there. You helping out with a book, is that correct?
Yeah, I'm writing a book. I'm working with. They're helping me do it. That's sort of my one of my next big projects.
Yeah.
So their goal is to improve the rationality of basically the world's elites, and to say how can we become better at thinking,
Hmm.
and hopefully then people will understand the risks that we face.
Hmm.
I mean, the fundamental view there, I think, is that if you look at what we're doing, it just seems crazy that people, we have these risks of being wiped out and almost no one cares about them.
Hmm.
That's just our world is so utterly insane that if we could improve the rationality of the elites, we could get a much better expected outcome.
Hmm.
And almost no one cares about rationality. So just a few people doing a little bit can have a major impact.
Hmm.
And hopefully, that we don't know this yet, but hopefully there'll be a large personal gain to becoming more rational.
Hmm.
I know if you, they also work at, there's a website called Less Wrong,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that's for improving rationality. And there's a lot of high IQ people who post there, and it would be great if there were people who were very smart and they learned rationality techniques, which include not procrastinating, setting your goals, learning social skills, and these people got much better outcomes, and they were able to then achieve positions of power and apply this to the rest of their life. So this is sort of a way of maybe leveraging rationality training.
Hmm.
It's also, of course, a way of intelligence amplification. I mean, rather than doing something mystical to your brain, just figuring out what your goals are,
Hmm.
or just doing basic research. Like, there's so many people that really want to be happy, but haven't spent 10 minutes doing a Google search on how to be happy. What has science told me? And that's pretty major. I think there's a lot of low-hanging fruit in terms of rationality and intelligence amplification. CFAR and Restaurant is helping trying to help people get some of that.
Hmm. Yeah, like mentioned before, we spoke about intelligence amplification. One way is to like improve the internal ability to make rational decisions,
Yeah,
and another sort of stream is to improve the tools that we use to help us make rational
right.
choices. Yeah.
And understand yourself. You mentioned evolutionary psychology. I mean,
Yes,
that's
absolutely.
critical to understand your own motives. Like, hey, wait, my brain thinks I'm a caveman,
Hmm.
and that's why I'm attracted to this kind of person and this kind of food, and that's why I get angry, and that's why I'm so afraid. And just knowing that about yourself, you can better regulate your behavior, or at least that's sort of the theory. And almost no one likes evolutionary psychology, right? The right doesn't like it because it sort of is against God, and the left doesn't like it because it's against the blank slate.
Yes. All right.
So, but hopefully we can people who care about rationality will learn about their caveman brains,
Mm.
and then you can
Steven
do
Pinker wrote an
experiments.
interesting book about that, The Blank Slate.
Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
and you run experiments on yourself, figure out what works, and get rich and powerful, and make the world a better place.
That's a good idea. I wish I wish I'd have thought of that earlier, but maybe.
Well, maybe
um,
for thousands more years, you might.
yeah, well, that's the thing. I mean, I did think about like getting rich and powerful and saving the world. Um, I guess I've been focusing on more measurable outcomes in the short term, like doing these blog videos,
Yeah,
hoping to increase awareness, such that somebody else might stumble upon like an interview with you, or like somebody else like a rationalist, and then decide, well, look, it does seem like a good idea. Let's investigate. I've
right.
got a lot of money. There's something I can do with this. Maybe I should donate to an organisation like the Sense Foundation, Mary, the Future of Humanity Institute, Foresight Institute, or something like that, and therefore be able to increase the likelihood of a better tomorrow. Um,
Yeah.
so
No,
yeah,
if
there are
nothing
many
else,
roles to play in I guess saving the world.
yeah,
Being rich is obviously a good one, but it's not the only one.
yeah. No, I mean, if nothing else, I think what the Singular Institute accomplished a lot by letting computer programmers know about the risk of unfriendly AI. At the very least, they've had conferences. The people at Google know this, so when they do decide to design it, at least it will occur to them, gee, this could go badly. It's not just a science fiction movie,
Mm.
and so getting people to take this into account is you slightly increase the chance of our species surviving.
Yeah, John Tooby, like if you, this guy is done like amazing amounts of research, and has spoken a lot, and sort of has done a lot for the evolutionary psychology sort of thing. So a lot of people know about what it is, and everything according like because of his work. He's got some interesting things to say. Les Wrong has also got a lot of very interesting posts on the evolutionary psychology.
Yeah,
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 which
it
I've read.
does. It's a great resource.
Yeah, definitely. Um, well, where to from here? Let me think. I've definitely covered a lot of ground so far. Is there any points that we haven't that we might not have brought up or that need more attention that you think viewers should be aware of?
Well, I would say to viewers, if you are interested in this, you should think of ways you can change your own life. We mentioned this, but there are things you can do with your own life. I mean, one is cryonics. I am a member. That's something
Wow.
most viewers probably have the money for that.
Hmm.
Neurofeedback is a bit more expensive, but it's going to get cheaper and cheaper. You can certainly go to Less Wrong.
Lesswrong.com. Yep.
Become more rational. You can donate money to these organizations. So, this isn't just entertainment. This transhumanism. You can play a role, and the expected benefit is huge. I mean, the way I look at it is if our species survives and goes on to colonize the galaxy and the universe, trillions upon trillions of people will be born.
Mm.
So if you look at it from an expected value point of view, let's say you're doing good can increase by 1 in a trillion the chances of our species surviving. But 1 in a trillion times, let's say a trillion times a trillion, that's over a trillion people you can save. So even if you're middle class American or Australian or something, even a small donation or doing a little bit can have a huge expected impact on the world. Another more mundane thing is, really there's, chronics might not end up working. You really want to care about your health. You want to try and make it. There's a chance if you're alive at 2050, you get to live for as long as you want. That's worth it. Wear a seatbelt in a car. Don't smoke. Do research on your health. The stakes are extraordinarily high for you and your species. So, make transhumanism, make this stuff a part of your life.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, well, it's been a real joy doing this interview, and we've covered like really interesting aspects, and I'm looking forward to chatting with you again. I'd like to
Yeah,
do
like
another
that.
interview when this book gets published,
Oh,
the
great. Thank you.
Rationality one with Sifa, and maybe we can drill down more specifically into some rationality techniques. Um,
Absolutely, yes.
yep, yep. So that sounds really good. So yeah, it's been really good. So thank you so much, James. It's been
Well,
awesome having you. And I'll
thank
be
you.
uploading this real soon. And if there's any links you want to send me, I'll put them in the description of the videos too.
Okay,
Yeah,
good.
awesome.
Okay.
So, cheers.
Yep. Cheers. Bye bye.